Hey, Robert. All right, we have not much in the chat. We have people. I know Neil is probably going to appear in a moment as well. He's wandering around the place. So I guess hello and welcome to this CALEXT very, very small interim meeting. Are we expecting anyone else?
Unknown.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything otherwise, so it may just be the five of us. In which case, as the chair, I will say I am quite sure that you're all very aware of the note well. I don't have slides on it, but please do note that we are under the note well as an IETF meeting, and then let's go for it. Robert, if you would like to speak to your slides. I can also unshare them and you can share them if you'd like to have control. I think I can just pass control, in fact. There we go.
Hello. Okay. Haven't ever. Now I see the controls for the slides. Perfect.
Yeah.
All right. All right. So hello everyone. I'm going to do I suggest I do a short presentation, which, given the people attending today, so I'm going to take one step backwards and start what might seem like an unnecessary high level, but I think at the end we will see that it might make sense to detangle the discussions we had over the last months. So bear with me is what I'm trying to say here. So why are we having this meeting? When we published JS Calendar in July 2021, we already had started working on the mapping draft, the JS Calendar iCalendar draft. But realistically, our main focus until we had published the JS Calendar RFC was mapping from iCalendar to JS Calendar. And this was, in retrospect, really just the trivial part. Whereas mapping from JS Calendar to iCalendar, we didn't really put much focus into it until RFC 8984 shipped. That was due to several reasons. First, we were tied up with publishing JS Calendar. We were having other obligations at work too, and also nobody really had any other implementation than the one we did in Cyrus, and the one we did in Cyrus was always very experimental. So in retrospect, we probably should have not shipped RFC 8984 before we shipped the before JS Calendar iCalendar also was published, but that's how it is now. So it was quite late, about a year later only, that Mike and I had identified issues with the scheduling properties. And this is now about half a year ago. And since then we are going, having discussions back and forth of how to fix this. But really, I don't, even with the partial result of last ITF, I really don't have the feeling we have come to any stable setup with regards how to do scheduling now and what should be changed, if anything. But as I wrote on the mailing list, I don't think that, I mean, we can't really proceed with JS Calendar BIS until this is settled. It's like it doesn't make sense to me to work on JS Calendar BIS when we can't do scheduling. That's kind of defeats the point of the whole exercise. So my goal of this meeting is to come to a decision with regards to scheduling. And if we cannot do that, then we should have a very clear picture on the questions that need to get answered so that we can come to a decision. So the issue, that's really just a recap, is we figured out that the scheduling models in the two formats, if there only are formats or different models, we see differ. In iCalendar, everyone knows we have just an attendee and a participant with a single calendar address. And this is used for both identification and scheduling. And there's only just one way to schedule, and that's this single calendar address. And in JS Calendar, we start to separate that. We have like a unique participant identity that's independent of scheduling. And this is not something we can currently represent in iCalendar, and we might not even be able to represent this in iCalendar backwards compatible in the January case. And now something that I always had the feeling was lurking underneath the discussion when we were discussing about specific scheduling properties in the last months, but never really addressed, and I think we should do this in this meeting, is do we actually need to care? And I think there are two different opinions or approaches to this. And the one approach is that JS Calendar can very well, JS Calendar supports the existing iCalendar data model, but it's free to extend it. And we might have extensions that are not necessarily representable in iCalendar completely, or probably not at all. And if I read the abstract in section 1 of the RFC, that's kind of hinted at. And I think this was the working mode for a long time of drafting the JS Calendar RFC. Whereas the other approach is that we say this is really just the same data model for the same calendaring model, and you should be able to use either format and have several services speaking one or the other format to interoperate. And this is currently the CALEXT charter. I see Neil is in the queue. I just finished this slide. This is basically the CALEXT charter. It was rechartered in my, if I remember right, when we published the JS Calendar RFC. And it speaks there about that extensions, JS Calendar extensions must cover both formats in a robust mapping, including ITIP. And even this wording signals to me that at that time we thought we already have this robust mapping, but it turns out we did not. So really the JS Calendar RFC currently doesn't live up to the standards of the current charter. Okay, I'm going to pause here and give Neil the mic.
Thanks, Robert. Yeah, I just want to say on this, I think, that first approach is what we were initially conceiving and is what we were initially chartered for. And we kind of changed this charter to try and say, well, everything has to now be implemented in iCalendar as well. Like the point was that you should definitely be able to, represent everything in the JS calendar, but you wouldn't necessarily need to keep maintaining, everything forever in both formats, because that's, as you know, a huge amount of work. And I remember Rick raising some eyebrows. That's CTO here for a few members that aren't Fastmail on this call at the new charter that discussing with him quite a few months back, the idea that we would also be trying to put everything into iCalendar too. So I mean, I think this is a really good thing to bring up on this slide, and yeah, I think that at least originally our approach was we do not have to make everything fully representable in both.
Okay, thank you, Neil. Bron or Neil, I don't know who of you, but there is someone speaking in the background, so it's hard to understand. Okay, I'm going, but I understood you, Neil, and we will get back to this to these two approaches later on when we come to what I think is the main message of these slides. So now let's just have a short look at the two models or proposed scheduling models. As you can see in the two most right columns, I labeled them as the one is really trying to repair scheduling, and this is what JS Calendar is aiming at. And the other one, the other proposal is to like reuse scheduling. It's just trying to use what's there. And this just summarizes, or this just goes into more detail what I said before. We see we have multiple scheduling methods, and we have a scheduling ID. Yeah, I don't think I need to go much into detail because of the people in this call. I think they all know this model more or less. And the other one, the reuse scheduling, is even simpler. That's really just what's there in iCalendar mapped to JS Calendar, with the exception that we make room for later on adding additional scheduling methods. So it's they're not completely mutually exclusive, but as you can see, they differ how they begin. Oh, Daniel, hello. Should I continue, Daniel, or I wasn't sure if I thought you just turned your video on. Okay, I understand now. Good. I will just continue with the next slide. We can back to this slide. If there is need to discuss the details. And now, I think what we really should do is look at at how these approaches and understandings relate to each other. And there, I think if we go the repair scheduling, so they say the JS Calendar way, and we say that JS Calendar can have more than iCalendar, then it's really straightforward for us to publish the RFCs. I mean, we can define whatever we want basically, but it means that we can't map everything to iCalendar. And I think this makes sense if we bet on providers to adopt JS Calendar. Otherwise, there is it's more or less dead features. I mean, to adopt JS Calendar soon, that's kind of missing in this slide here. Whereas if we keep with the repair scheduling approach, but we say we do what the charter currently requires us to do, then that's going to take considerable effort, and I'm not even sure if there will be any way to be backwards compatible for all cases. But the main idea behind this would be that providers either adopt JS Calendar, or probably it's less work for them to implement the changes that we bring to iCalendar with this repair scheduling model. So it gives them two options on which we bet. Of course, providers can just not implement anything, but let's say we bring enough good new stuff on the table that they see the value for them. And the reuse scheduling, there is really just one thing to consider, because in the JS Calendar is more than iCalendar. That's not applicable because we don't bring anything new in JS Calendar to scheduling. And that's, of course, it's easy to standardize. It leaves additional the repair scheduling work to experiments, probably future standards. And it bets on that JS Calendar brings enough other stuff on the table that people still are interested in implementing it. Yeah, and I think this is really our decision matrix that we should look at. We should not just look at the specific scheduling model, but also look at the mode under which we are really developing this standard, because this was I think, missing in the last months. This is the end of the slide for this specific topic. So hopefully we can have a discussion about that now.
I guess I'll pop myself in the queue first then, since no one else has jumped up. It seems to me that reuse scheduling now doesn't stop us doing repair scheduling later. It doesn't stop us adding new things in a second revision. It's whether the first revision fixes everything straight away, or whether we go for the minimum possible now and add other things later. Does that map to your understanding, Robert?
Yes, it does. If you go back one slide, I can. Sorry.
Yeah,
I can go back.
you're driving. Yeah.
The only difference is so the participant schedule ID in the repair scheduling model, that's not defined in the reuse scheduling model. So that's not an issue because we can define it later, should that turn out to be the thing we want then. The only difference is that these last parts, the delegated from and to, they would refer in the repair scheduling model to this schedule ID, this non-existent in the reuse model. But I think realistically, we would always need to say the delegated from and to, they refer to URIs of a participant that are either in the send to or the schedule ID. So it's not that we are completely blocking anything in the reuse scheduling model. Yes, the short answer is the reuse scheduling model is almost a subset of the repair scheduling model, except for this last thing here.
Yeah.
I think it complicates. It complicates. So go back to that slide, please, Robert. I think that's a more useful one. It complicates JMAP calendars a bit, I think, with the reuse scheduling. The nice thing about the repair scheduling is you're separating kind of the ID of the participant from how can I send messages to them, because the ID. So at the moment in JMAP calendars, you've got to iterate through all of the things in like the send to and go, do I recognize any of these URIs? And then if so, this one's me. Because one of the key things you have to do in a client is work out which participant is you. I think it's a lot easier if there's just the schedule ID, because then you're just, instead of having a nested loop, you're just, is this schedule ID any of the IDs that I know as me? And so I think that's actually quite a nice property to have for JMAC calendars. Separately, that shouldn't be tied to saying you must have an IMIP kind of entry in the send to. You probably will for now, but that would be weird if one of those is like different to the others, and you have to know that it's not. Yeah. So that's why one of the reasons I think that this model is much better than the kind of reuse scheduling model.
Is there a way to get both of these with a should only do IMIP and have schedule ID match the IMIP as an initial? If you want to be backwards compatible, you have to do it this way. And anything that doesn't have that is no longer compatible with existing scheduling.
I mean, I'm not quite sure what you're proposing there, Ron. The one on the right kind of is also it's specifically just an ITIP URI rather than having IMIP separately. Now, I think we do want to register a kind of perhaps a generic ITIP thing for there, which we can do in the registry already, extending JS calendar. But I'll use it specifically for non-mail through addresses, because we already see systems that have this. So like iCloud has an internal URI for doing ITIP internally and an IMIP URI for doing ITIP externally, and they're both valid IETF things for the event, and they can't represent them both on the iCalendar event at the moment because iCalendar doesn't support that. And so they end up trying to rewrite them in various conditions when it's at the edges of their network, whatever. And sometimes that fails and you get the wrong one leaking out and you can't use it. This method, the other is so much cleaner, whereas whether you can just put both of those in there and not have to worry about this rewriting nonsense.
Yeah, so long as you're never round tripping out of JS Calendar into iCalendar for something, which we will need to be able to support for quite a while.
I mean, sure, but I think, yeah, ultimately, that goes back to that, the question of kind of superset versus trying to make them exactly equivalent. I mean, I think we can map this pair scheduling quite easily to iCalendar. That's the other thing I should say here. Like the schedule ID maps exactly to whatever the URI is for the participant at the moment, and then that is also always if it's a mail to an IMIP entry, otherwise, or whatever we call the other one, ITIP entry. And then mapping the other way, we just have to add some extra iCalendar properties for here are extra send to methods. I actually don't think it would be too hard to map that repair scheduling one to iCalendar one-to-one. I think that's actually a good compromise from where we were before to something that maps quite well.
So let me say this. It's almost everything here is simple to map to iCalendar. We can always come up with new parameters and properties. That never was the issue. The issue is that for an arbitrary JS Calendar participant with, so that's not actually a representation of an iCalendar, of the iCalendar model. We can map this to any properties we define, but basically, if other systems can't work with this data because it's not backwards compatible, then we always risk the fragmentation of scheduling. So
but
mapping is not the issue. Processing it is the issue.
So, but Robert, I don't quite see how you get into that situation because you're like the only way you're going to move it between these systems is via a message that's probably like going to have an iCalendar version and a JS Calendar version for quite some time because you don't know what the other system's going to support. And so this would be that they support the JS Calendar version to take that, but then don't support enough to actually understand it when they map it back to iCalendar or something. That just seems weird to me.
Well, I understand this differently. I understand this that we can take a JS Calendar event, map that to iCalendar using new properties. Send it in a way that send it full-blown, including the complete information in iCalendar to another system. If they support the new properties, fine. If they do not support the new properties, they can still operate with the data they know, like the attendee address and stuff, but can still, at the best, loop back the other properties to us. So we only if the client, if they, for whatever reason, throw away some of these properties, the server that understands JS Calendar might need to merge the information it has back. But that's my understanding how this may work.
I think it's just a matter of saying, if you're creating, a JS Calendar from scratch, your schedule ID, if there is an IMIP mail to URI available for this participant, you should use that as your schedule ID for the most compatibility. That's kind of it.
Yeah, but this is exactly the breaking point for me. It doesn't help. I mean, I know 99% of all the stuff here is not really the issue, but it's still it's still an incompatible model at the very end. And when we standardize how people should map it, and we see there is a gap that can't be mapped, we get back to the question of is this a superset, or are we talking about
But-
equal models? And this is
What do you
this
mean
is
by
all
can't be
about-
mapped? I thought we agreed that we could map all of this.
well, when I say map, I mean map in a way that both, of course, persists and allows to transfer the data, but also defines how systems should operate with it. And
Yeah,
that's
I think Neil's correct here that we don't need to both make it backward compatible with iCalendar by extending iCalendar and backward compatible with existing implementations that don't know anything about the new scheduling, because otherwise we could never move at all. So if we define a mapping to iCalendar, then we will have matched our charter.
okay. So that basically says we recharter and say JS
Well,
calendar is a superset, right? So
no, we have the charter doesn't require that we never change scheduling. We just say that we have a mapping to iCalendar for the extended properties, and we choose which one gets mapped to the existing for most compatibility.
Yeah.
well, I've tried to write this multiple times now, the mapping. I'd be happy for someone else to take it because I don't think I can. So, but if it works out, great. But I don't see it, to be very honest.
Neil, do you want to have a go at proposing the complete mapping in that case?
Yeah, I can propose how that should map. I think that makes sense. I don't.
Okay, so that will cover JS calendar, iCalendar, and ITIP, the whole.
So, well, it's mapping from the. So I mean, the essential problem is you've got a single calendar user address in iCalendar that would map one-to-one to the schedule ID as proposed here. And also, if it's a mail to, it's an IMIP. If it's not a mail to, it's whatever we define ITIP or new thing entry in the reply to sent to. That's the easy way. Other way around is kind of simply reversing that. Schedule ID becomes the calendar user address. And if there are any extra properties in reply to send to, we come up with a way of representing those in iCalendar so that if we need to round trip stuff, we can store the extra stuff. That's an extension to iCalendar because iCalendar doesn't support multiple properties at the moment. If there's only one property in that, then and it's the same as schedule ID, then job done anyway. It all just maps to the calendar user address. That is it, as far as I can see. Am I missing something there?
I'm missing still I'm missing still not the mapping, but the way the instructions, how this should all be done with ITIP. So I think it's really better if you summarize the complete process, including requests, replies, and everything. Because at the very end, we will need this. This needs to go into the.
Well, okay,
the
so there's two separate things. There's mapping this between iCalendar and JS Calendar, which is what we're talking about. And I think that is what I just described, and that's fairly well. I think it's straightforward. Then in terms of ITIP stuff, there's kind of there's this external versus internal problem. And the way I've always thought this is going to have to work, that's the only way I can see it working, is I invite someone at external system to an event. That initial invitation is going to have to include an iCalendar part and a JS calendar part because I have no idea what their system's for. There's no negotiation going on here. The only thing you can use is email because there's no other defined standard for this. So that's going to go to them for the initial invitation. But the whole point of this model in JS Calendar is the JS Calendar version can then include, here's some other ways we can upgrade this mechanism. Now we've found each other and found our, different calendar systems. And we don't have to keep going back and forth with IMIP, with iCalendar going forwards. Like that's, but that's, we're going to require, support on the other side as well. And so once they're both implementing new stuff, we probably don't have to worry too much about necessarily doing this in iCalendar. That was kind of the idea. And if they don't support the new stuff, that's fine. They'll just ignore the JS calendar entirely, apply to the iCalendar, and that will still work. Maybe I should write that up more if that was hard to understand, like speaking. But like in my mind, that all works nicely, gives us a nice upgrade path, and is pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I think you should just write this. You write in the standard draft. because otherwise, again, we just have this translation back and forth between an email and the drafts and stuff.
Well, I just think it's. I mean, so I do think this is not doesn't necessarily belong in this draft though. This draft, as in this, the RFC you're writing is just how do I convert between iCalendar and JS Calendar? That is separate to ITIP. ITIP is not iCalendar.
Yeah, but I mean, we can just create a new draft and put the info in there. Or I mean, I'm just saying, write it like you would write it in a draft, where you write it.
All right. Okay. So yeah. Well, I'll write something up as an email and we can work out what to do with it. And I guess.
Okay.
Cool. Shall we move on to the rest of the slides?
I mean, the rest of the slides is not about this topic. It's also about scheduling. But these were the slides
cool.
for this discussion.
It sounds like we have reached a point where Neil will write up a proposal for how to make repair scheduling backwards compatible. Is that what everyone else got from this?
That's my understanding, yes.
Cool. All right.
Good. I have to click here. So since we still have time, so I'm wondering if we should guard a couple of participant properties that really only make sense for schedulable participants. So on the left side, the left bullets would be the ones where I think setting these without having a schedule ID or a send to really doesn't make much sense to me. The right ones that you see is stuff that you can set on any participant. Is that?
I think participation status you could have anyway, like as in I'm organizing this and I'm just using this to keep track of who's coming. I'm not actually using this calendar event to send them the email. So I'm not using the scheduling side of, the calendaring system, but I am storing what I expect their participation status in this event for my reference.
Yeah, okay. Yep.
That's probably the main one. The rest of those I kind of agree. I don't know how important it is to forbid it, but I do agree that they're not much use without the schedule ID.
This is really again a bit driven by the fact when we define the mapping to an attendee in iCalendar, the left hand side is the stuff you see that are really tagged on as parameters on an attendee property. So for stuff like participation status, when we decide that should be independent of a schedule ID, then we would need to come up with ways to put that actually into a participant component, which is obviously doable, but I just brought it up here. Yeah. All right. So the next decision. I remember Mike saying repeatedly we should maybe deprecate iCalendar sent by the parameter because no one seems to be using it. I looked in our systems and we are not using it. The new sent from property that's in a JS calendar object on the top level is not the same thing as the sent by parameter. Currently in JS Calendar we do have this property, but I mean if we say we deprecate it in iCalendar, it doesn't make sense to keep it in JS Calendar, obviously. Any opinions on that? Mike, since you brought this up,
Oh, can you hear me? Yeah,
Yes.
Yep.
yeah, it was just as a result of going through all this stuff and also doing some experimenting. I've never seen anybody set it, and I couldn't think of any actual use for it. So it just sort of complicates things to a minor extent. And I thought if we were, it would be nice to rewrite the ITIP spec because it's overcomplicated. It's really difficult to follow. It's got all those huge tables which are irrelevant, and it doesn't really make it clear that you're better off sending as few properties as possible. There are lots of good reasons for rewriting it, and it just sort of fitted in with that.
Okay, so do we need to?
Problem to have this unused parameter, or
Well, it's partly that people probably go through the same process that I went through. I'm sort of reading through the spec, and I'm thinking that it's here, so it must have some importance. And it took me quite a while to figure out that it probably doesn't, and it's not used by anybody. And in places where you think it might get used, it doesn't get used. So it's just a complication that's unnecessary. It might be worth saying somewhere that we just deprecate it and it don't make a big noise about it, but there's make it clear that it's not being used.
but do you expect a draft saying this is deprecated point, or do you expect that to be done? Well, we do that with a GS calendar.
I guess I guess I was thinking about it to some extent in the context of doing mappings between one and the other. There's no point in mapping something that nobody's using. So in JS Calendar, it can be just dropped, and in iCalendar, we could just say somewhere it's deprecated because, as far as I know, nobody uses it. And, it wasn't a big deal, but
It's
Yeah,
also. Sorry, Ken, go ahead.
yeah. I was going to say I think that if it does get deprecated, it needs to be in a revision to 5545. But I think Mike is correct that we shouldn't do anything in JS Calendar that requires us to map it to sent by. We should avoid using it in the mapping, as I think was what Mike's saying, because we
yeah.
intend to deprecate it in a revision to 5545.
Okay, right.
Yeah. So this sounds to me like whatever happens with the sent by parameter in iCalendar, we should drop it from GS Calendar. We can still map it as we would map any other unknown iCalendar property. So we can preserve it in the JS Calendar representation if we want to. I think that's the best approach, given that the send by parameter is in iCalendar also not clearly defined. So we wouldn't even be able to come up with a clear definition JS Calendar without risking incompatibilities with the existing use in iCalendar. Okay, perfect. Oh yeah, and this is just something I came to realize. I think we also need to add the schedule agent, schedule for send properties for the reply to as separate properties. Currently, you can just set the schedule agent, schedule for send properties on a participant. So really on the way sending something to the reply to, but you would also want to do that for the reply to. Yeah, this was just an omission in my understanding.
Does iCalendar have a way to represent that at the moment?
Yes, you can set it on the organizer.
Oh, okay. Then fine. Yeah.
Okay, and that's really the, or is it? Yes, that's the real last slide. Okay, that's all I had.
Thank you, Robert.
All right, thank you. Thanks for getting up so early. So, I guess at this point, do we want to look at anything else? Do we want to just wait till IETF 115? The actions that I'm aware of from here are that for the scheduling stuff, Neil to write up the scheduling, and for the other stuff, Robert will add the reply to scheduling stuff and will remove the sent by mapping, and possibly just put a note saying that aware of this, it's going to be treated like unknown.
Yeah, and I will. Oh, sorry. Okay, yes, and I will also guard these scheduling properties that are dependent on having a schedule ID or sent to.
And I'll update
sorry?
JMap calendars. I'll update the JMap calendar spec with these 2 new properties as well. They'll probably need to be referenced in there for like don't send a reply if this is blah blah blah.
And so the goal is that we publish a new RFC draft for next IETF. So Neil, I guess you will add the schedule ID to the JS calendar BIS draft on GitHub then?
Sure.
Okay. And I think that's the only, let me check. And I think that's actually the only thing that needs to be done in the JS calendar BIS for. Oh,
we also
no,
need an ITIP or whatever scheduling method that you can use in the sent to if it's not a mail to.
Yeah.
Right?
So yes. So I think that the other, if we now go with the repair scheduling model, then I think the other method shouldn't be defined because it's it seems strange to me to have like a catch-all. ITIP or whatever.
I mean,
we can even.
The point of it is the point of it is just that, like, it's a URI, but there's nothing useful you can do about it because it's some internal thing that only the system generated knew about it, kind of thing. So if you don't recognize it, there's not much you can do. So yeah, I mean, in that,
like any vendor extension, you just anything else is a vendor extension. You can name it any unknown property that's in a vendor.
Well, I mean, this is a bit like those iCloud internal URIs. You know, it's what do you want to put them under? You can put them under other, or we can put something called ITIP or whatever. Like it's just saying it doesn't matter if it leaks out. There's nothing you can do with it.
Yeah, I was initially tempted even to put in these slides, but I didn't because I didn't want to blow up the discussion on this specific thing. I was tempted to replace other with a vendor extension property where the vendor is IETF RFC 5545, and then it's like RFC 5545 organizer for the reply to, and RFC 5545 attendee for the send to, because that's really what it is. It's just the value of this property mapped into JS calendar without any further meaning. And someone creating a new JS calendar object should like never put stuff like other in here. If it's, let's say, iCloud, they should put this stuff in their iCloud vendor extension. So the other is really just, in my understanding, just a thing we introduced to map iCalendar, unknown iCalendar URIs to JS calendar.
Yeah, I agree with that. That it makes sense to leave this as being a vendor space if you're going to do a vendor thing, and everything else should map to one of the named things. All right. If we're done with this, maybe we should have a quick glance at the state of the data tracker. Let me just sign in here. And if I unslide you, I think I can just do that. Yep. And then share screen. So we have iCalendar extensions, JS Calendar iCalendar, JS Calendar BIS. There's JS Contact, which we'll be talking about, and JS Contact extensions at the next meeting. We also have quite a lot of expired drafts here. Scheduling controls we're going to let die. That was my thing, and it turns out there's nothing really worth standardizing there. But we have tasks, we have series, we have subscriptions, we have upgrade, and we have vPol. And I'm sure at least one of these I was supposed to have finished a working group last call and submitted, and that hasn't happened, and now they're expired. So I will email the individual authors and ask them to do something about that, do an updated version of the draft. Do we want to talk about any of them now, or should we just update the drafts and go ahead?
I can update the drafts. I mean, there's tasks. There was some discussion about that. I can make some changes and then update it to unexpire it. We were talking about vPol this morning. What we can. I can have a quick look through it and then maybe just make some minor change and unexpire that again as well. Republish that.
Great, thanks. That will make it easier to plan them for the next meeting.
What I recall is that task and series should be very short.
No, they're quite big. Subscription upgrade, I think, was the one that was pretty much, I think, pretty close to completion.
Mm.
And that's a fairly small spec. Why don't I unexpire that thing? I mean, I think is the one that's getting close to last call.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it has had a last call. You can see it's got the date on it that it's supposed to have been dealt with by now. There's
Okay.
August 2022 time on it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thanks. That'd be good. And then I'll do the I'll double check the comments on it from the working group last call that happened via email, but I suspect I'll just submit that one straight through.
Okay.
Probably already asked you whether you're aware of any IPR on it, but I might as well ask you in person now. Are you aware of any IPR on it?
No, I'm not aware of any IPR on it.
Great. Then I can answer that truthfully in the write-up. Yeah, it's just you as the author, so that would be easy.
All right. Great.
Cool. Thank you. And quick glance at our milestones says, yep, so it was just that one was subscription upgrade was supposed to be submitted, and tasks is supposed to be submitted in November. So hopefully we can get that done and out soon as well. Excellent. Any other business?
And what about the GS Contact and all those vCard stuff?
I'm working on Mario and I are working on the RFC, and this should. Our goal is still to be able to do last call at the next IETF.
Okay.
Great. That's everything I have. Thank you, everybody. I think it's been quite productive, really. Thanks for making time at this weird hour. It's
Bye,
good
all.
for
All right.
Australians for once.
Thank
Wow.
you.
See you. Bye bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye bye.
Bye.